India's Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, is no more. General Rawat, his wife Madhulika Rawat, and 11 others passed away after the chopper they were travelling in crashed this morning in the southern state of Tamil Nadu, just 10 kilometres from the arrival point. The sole survivor of the crash is Group Captain Varun Singh, who is currently in the hospital. The Indian Air Force chopper crashed near Commodore. The cause of the crash is still not known, and an inquiry has been ordered to ascertain the cause. At 11:47 a.m. IST, the helicopter departed from the Sulur base in Tamil Nadu. It was scheduled to land at the Wellington Defence Staff College. But 33 minutes later, when the chopper was just 10 kilometers away from the arrival point, it caught fire and crashed. Locals then rushed to the spot and tried to control the blaze. At around 2:30 p.m. IST, nearly 90 minutes after the crash, the blaze was finally doused. Tributes have been pouring in from across the country. The President of India, Ram Nath Kovind, offered condolences to the bereaved families, paying tributes to General Bipin Rawat. President Kovind said that India has lost one of its bravest sons. He added that 4 decades of selfless service of General Rawat to the motherland was marked by exceptional gallantry and heroism. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also paid his tributes through a tweet. The Prime Minister said, and I'm quoting, General Bipin Rawat was an outstanding soldier, a true patriot. He greatly contributed to modernizing the country's armed forces. His insights and perspectives on strategic matters were exceptional. His passing away has saddened me deeply. That was the statement put out by the Indian Prime Minister shortly after this tragic news came in. Prime Minister Modi added, as India's first Chief of Defence Staff, General Rawat worked on diverse aspects relating to the armed forces, including defence reforms. He brought with him a rich experience of serving in the army. India will never forget his exceptional service. The country's Defence Minister, Rajnath Singh, also offered his condolences. He said that General Rawat's untimely demise is an irreparable loss to our armed forces and the country. The helicopter that was carrying the Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, had taken off from the Sulur Air Base. It was on its way to Wellington in Coimbatore. The chopper is a modern transport helicopter used by the Indian Air Force. It is a Soviet-designed Russian chopper designed to carry personnel, cargo and equipment. With us on the broadcast is Air Commodore Ashminder Singh Bahal. Thanks very much, sir, for being here with us. Your initial reaction to this absolutely unfortunate piece of news coming in? So if my voice is going through to you, we have been getting our viewers the sense of shock that is palpitating through the country, and the tributes that have been pouring in. Commodore Ashminder Singh Bahal, if my voice is going through to you, your reaction to this tragic piece of news.
So first thing I would like to say, Molly, is that it is an extremely tragic news. India has lost a valiant soldier and a very fine general. He was instrumental as first CDS of this country to not only bring in synergy within the three armed forces, three services of the armed forces, but he was also instrumental in bringing in the concept of theatre commands and integration. And it is extremely sad to hear that we have lost a general who was actually going to make a big difference to bring about the effectiveness of our armed forces. Now, the other thing that I would like to say is that he was getting airborne from an air base Surur, which is where our light combat aircraft and Mi-17s are parked. And the pilot that who was flying this aircraft was Wing Commander Chauhan, who himself is an accomplished pilot and is the commanding officer of 109 HU.
Right, and talking about the significance of the post that General Bipin Rawat held as the country's first Chief of Defence Staff, helming that entire process of integrating the country's forces, an extremely challenging task that he had helmed, weaving together the operations and the functioning.
Exactly. After Field Marshal Manekshaw, who actually, Sam Manekshaw, Sam the Bahadur as he was called, and incidentally he was also from Coonoor or in Wellington, where very close to where this crash has taken place. He was the first one to win the war for us in 1971 by integrating the three services. And after him, we had a very fine general who wanted to bring about integration not only in the all arms concept of making our army and its elements more mobile, more all arms composite, as well as integrating the Air Force and Navy with the application of the Army in a tri-service integrated environment. So he was one of the persons who was instrumental in bringing in the concepts of theatre command, as well as instrumental in taking up the charge at a time when we are facing through a hostile China and a very, very aggressive Pakistan.
And talking about the legacy left behind by late General Bipin Rawat, any particular interaction with him that you would like to look back at?
Absolutely. You know, when one of the books, I had written a chapter on COVID and how the armed forces and their readiness, as well as the reaction, how we should do. Last year, during its launch, I was very fortunate, and also we were having on artificial intelligence as well as on how to use technology and how do we bring about multi-domain operations. The book had a lot of these chapters, and multi-domain operations and artificial intelligence was one of them. And those chapters were written by me, and I was very fortunate that he launched the book. He came and congratulated me for it, and he stood with me and my wife, and we were very proud to have photographs taken from him. I found him to be a very humble man, a very intellectual person, and a person who had a foresight to see what the vision of the armed forces required, especially in an environment where China is so aggressive, not just in South China Sea, but also in the Indo-Pacific Ocean.
Right, let's also, sir, talk about his tenure as the country's army chief before his elevation and the tremendous challenges that came along with that.
Absolutely. He commanded the third largest army in the world, which has a strength of 1.15 million and which is involved throughout, not just in India, but in UN peacekeeping operations all over the world. But at the same time, it is this army which has led from the front in all the counterinsurgency operations, whether in J&K or in Nagaland or in the Northeast. Now, when he commanded the army, at that time also, he was focused on modernizing the army, especially on the armored artillery and other fronts. As one of the commanders of the army, as one of the generals, he had really taken a deep interest in bringing about better air-land operations concept between the Air Force and the army.
One thing that also stands out when we talk to the media personnel who also interacted with him is the candid way in which he used to lead those conversations and the interactions that you were also looking back at and the way they stood out in terms of the approach that he had.
You're absolutely right. You know, the general was never shy in taking the bull by the horns. And also that he was very candid in his appreciation of China or in his appreciation of Pakistan and their intentions. And he very openly said that, as well as the proxy war that Pakistan is carrying out in our territory. And he did say on a number of occasions that India is no longer a weak India and Indian armed forces are no longer weak armed forces, and that we will be taking the battle right into the heart of the other enemy country. And that is what he proposed. And he always stood firm for the defense of our nation, for the security of our country. And he was very, very patriotic in terms of how to employ the armed forces to secure our nation.
Right. We understand an inquiry has been launched into the cause of the crash, and to better understand what exactly transpired, we will, of course, keep a close eye on those developments. But just for those uninitiated, if you can elaborate on the process that is followed as far as such inquiries are concerned.
Absolutely. The Indian Air Force has been very prompt. It's a professional Air Force. Very promptly, it has instituted an inquiry. And I'm very sure that there'll be very senior officers who will be made the presiding officer, and they will look into each and every aspect of why the crash has taken place. It is too early to say what could be the main reason for the crash, but I would like to say here that there is something called black box or the flight data recorder, which is there in the aircraft. And if that is recovered, it can give us a lot of pointers as to why and how the accident took place. It not only records the conversations between the pilots itself, that is the main captain and the co-pilot, but it also indicates the conversations that had taken place with the air traffic control tower, whether the aircraft was going into a descent, whether it was going for a landing, what was the situation at that period of time. It also records not only just the conversation, but also the various parameters of the helicopter. And when it records the parameters of the helicopter, it would give a great source of indication as to what was happening at that period of time when this crucial accident took place.
Right. If you can also sir, shed more light on this particular chopper that the General was traveling on, the Mi-17 V5 helicopter, and what we know about it.
Absolutely. The Mi-17 V5 helicopter is made by Kazan company, which is a Russian helicopter company. We had bought 80 such helicopters. We have over 220 Mi-17s in the Indian Air Force. It flies tens of thousands of hours every year. It's an extremely safe helicopter. It is a multi-utility helicopter. It can carry 24 armed men. It can carry passengers. It can carry 4 tons of load. It can even carry guns, rockets, as well as air-to-ground missiles. So it's a very versatile medium utility transport helicopter, but it can be used in the armed role. It can be used for troop insertions. It can be used in the high altitude areas. It has been used in J&K, Ladakh. It has been used in Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, in variety of terrains, including that of desert. If I were to sum up this helicopter, not only in India, but also in other countries, as well as in Russia, where it is used in large numbers, it's a very versatile, a very safe helicopter. It has been used for VVIP duties. It has advanced avionics, advanced weather radar, as well as advanced navigation systems.
Before I let you go, General Rawat also led the troops, not just in India, but also on United Nations peacekeeping missions. Would you like to elaborate on his role on that front?
Absolutely. The General was a great leader. He had served abroad on many occasions, and he had also led the UN peacekeeping forces. And now I want to tell you one thing. It's extremely difficult to lead UN peacekeeping forces, especially when you have people from multinational forces. And the General had showed his mettle in whatever appointment that he was given at and had excelled in it.
Right. And if I can also ask you to comment on the process that will be followed from here onwards, like you shared with us earlier. For those of our viewers just joining us, the modalities, the nitty-gritties of such inquiries that are conducted. The probe has already been launched. We don't want to delve into the speculation that's been doing the rounds about the cause of the crash. But if you can shed more light on the process that is followed.
Moment an accident takes place, within a few hours, a court of inquiry is ordered. The presiding officers and its members are decided, and they include the presiding officer usually is the pilot, who's an extremely senior as well as a very experienced pilot in the fleet that where the accident has taken place. So probably he'll be from helicopters, and more probably he'll be from Mi-17s himself. And though I'm not sure as to now who is the presiding officer, plus he will have specialists. He will have Mi-17 1V specialists, both in engineers as well as pilots, as well as he will have other, officers who could be of assistance in this investigation. So there will be a team of about 5 to 6 people who will be investigating, who are high and very good professionals. But most importantly, they will look at every aspect. And like I was mentioning it earlier, the flight data recorder or the black box would be an important piece of evidence which they would have removed by now. I'm sure they would have removed by now, but I have not been told about it. But that's the first thing that the inquiry team would do, is to get the flight data recorder. Subsequently, they will gather all the evidence at the site itself. They'll pick up the pieces. It could be even sent to NAL for further analysis of the aircraft aeroframe and other pieces, so as to determine what was the damage, why did the damage take place. Metallurgical aspects would also be looked into. And in addition to that, the entire sequence of events from the time, air traffic control tower recordings would also be taken. And right from the sequence when the aircraft, the pilots had gone to the aircraft, to the time the aircraft got taxied out, took off, went. And as far as the initial indications indicate, that it was probably in the descent path towards Wellington when this accident took place in Nilgiris. And since this is a hilly area, it is also prone to a little bit of weather, and it is also prone to obstructions. So we are now speculating as to what could the causes be. The causes could include technical problems, but whenever we choose a VVIP helicopter, the aircraft is gone over tooth and nail, and all types of tests and checks are carried out, which are mandatory. And subsequent to the normal checks, we also look at the security aspects, and even the commandos were with the general. So they will be looked into all these aspects. They will be looked into weather aspects. They'll be looked into whether there was any high tension wire there, whether it was controlled flight into terrain, or whether there is any form of sabotage or anything. Those aspects will also be looked into. And it is only when the inquiry is completed that we'll come to know. And I can assure you one thing, Indian Air Force is one of the most professional air forces in the world. And when they do an inquiry, the truth will definitely come out.
Absolutely. And speaking about the rescue mission, it has been an extremely challenging one, sir, for those very reasons, given the terrain and the weather conditions.
Absolutely. Now, one of the reasons which is being attributed by many channels, and like the professional channel that World is one, they have not discussed any of the causes because it's too early to say that. But the other channels would be discussing about the weather, the visibility conditions, and whether there was any controlled flight into terrain or getting into an unusual attitude. All these are for future. But definitely, that place is a challenging area. It is a hilly area. It has a lot of obstacles. And also in any hilly area, there would be a different type of weather and turbulence that is associated with the hilly terrain.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.